Okay, ready? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're ready for action. So, if I can do the announcements as usual. So, a warm welcome to those attending and also to our viewers watching live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. This is a meeting of the Audit Committee. My name is John Chesshire and I'm the chairman of this meeting. Details of the business to be considered today is shown on the agenda, copies of which are accessible on YouTube underneath the broadcast. In terms of housekeeping, we're not expecting a fire drill here in person this evening. If the fire alarm goes off, please follow officers to the fire exits and out of the building to the designated meeting points. For those in the room, please switch any mobile devices to silent before the meeting starts, please. I don't think we've got any residents here in person. For those of you watching via YouTube, if you are so minded, you can complete one of our residents' feedback forms. These can also be found in the information section underneath the YouTube video. These forms are intended to help us improve the way that we run our meetings. We always introduce ourselves in terms of attendees. As I said, I'm John Chesshire. I'm the chair of the Audit Committee, and we'll go around the table one by one to introduce ourselves.
Hi there, I'm Councillor Higgins, substituting for Richard Lewis.
Councillor Nick Dennis.
Councillor Rita Chamdale.
Councillor Stuart Mavis, substituting for Councillor Abbey.
Councillor Tony Bowles.
Helen Thompson, partner from Ernst & Young.
Larissa Midoni, manager from Ernst & Young.
Stephanie Rayo, internal audit manager.
Alex Brown, head of counter fraud.
Claire Baker, head of internal audit.
Andy Evans, corporate director of finance.
James Lake, director of pensions, treasury and statutory accounts.
Ryan Dale, democratic services officer.
Lovely. Thank you very much, everybody. So we'll move to the agenda then. We have our standard agenda item number 1, apologies for absence. Ryan.
Yep, so we have apologies from Councillor Lewis with Councillor Higgins substituting, and apologies from Councillor Abbey with Councillor Mavis substituting.
Thank you very much indeed. Agenda item 2 is declarations of interest, and here it's the opportunity for any of the committee members to declare any interest they may have. I'm seeing lots of shaking of heads, no declarations of interest. Thank you very much indeed. Agenda item 3, to confirm that all the items on today's agenda will be considered in public. We don't have any part 2 items which we would cover in private were there to be any. So it's all in public today. Part 4, or agenda item 4 then, is the external audit 2020 to 2021, the EY audit update. We'll go to James. Have I missed one? Oh, minutes, sorry. Yeah, missed that. I was getting carried away and excited. Not trying to beat any record or anything. Agenda item 4, I looked at the minutes. I thought they were brilliant, so I just skipped over it. Agenda item 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 31st of January. I normally whip through these fairly quickly. So page 1, were there any comments on page 1 of the minutes? Page 2, page 3, and page 4. Okay, so we'll take the minutes as read. Thank you very much, and apologies for skipping over that rather precipitously. Agenda item 5, though, brings us to the external audit 2020-2021 EY audit update. James.
Thank you. If I may, Chair, I will give a quick summary before I hand over to EY to elaborate on their 2 reports. In terms of the Council, we've made good progress. At the last committee, we highlighted a national issue regarding the disclosure and treatment of infrastructure assets. Since then, regulations and SIPFA accounting guidance have been issued. We've worked through these with Larissa and the team, and I'm pleased to say that this has now been finished and finalised and closed off from an audit perspective. Unfortunately, though, we do have a new national issue relating to pensions, and I'll let EY talk about that in further detail. However, I do not see this as a big issue. We've already made some progress on this, and I don't see it's a big issue for us to sort of resolve it going forward. So it won't be the same sort of delay as the infrastructure assets were. In other outstanding areas, we continue to work with EY and move forward. Regarding the pension fund, we've completed the audit, noting the national issue on pensions and sort of the tie-in with the council's audit. The draft results report is attached and for your review and shows an unqualified opinion. So with that, if I may, Chair, I'll pass over to EY.
Thank you very much indeed, James. And I like the sound of finalised, finished and closed off. That sounds kind of definitive and good. Welcome to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And we quite like the idea of finalised, finished and closed off as well. We'd just like to get there. That's and that's not any criticism of anybody in this room at all. As James has said, we have a couple of items. I appreciate they were circulated quite late and not with the papers. So although I know you are all very diligent at reading their papers, we'll probably just take a little bit more time than usual in introducing them. And I thought we would start actually with the update for with the update for the council, and then we'll come on to the pension fund, which is a little bit more chunky in terms of the information. So James's summary is very fair, but I'm going to ask Larissa just to go through each of the areas of the risks that we identified in our planning report to the committee and say where we are, because things have moved on, which is good.
I'm going to take you through a summary of our progress report for the council. I'm starting on page 5. Hopefully everyone received that. Give you a second to find the page. It's status of the 21-22 audit.
Sorry. It's the one page that hasn't come out very clearly. It's the one after the green garden. It's just covered slightly the bottom of the table. Sorry.
Okay, so hopefully everyone is on the right page. You'll see here a list of our areas of audit focus. And with regards to the first areas of audit focus, or our fraud risks, we have completed the work since the last update in January. And these are specifically the management override, generic risks, misstatements due to fraud or error. So we completed our journal entry testing. The risk of inappropriate capitalization of revenue expenditure, we completed the work as well, and accounting adjustments made in the movements and reserve statement. We have no findings to report with regards to these fraud risks we have addressed. With regards to the following one, valuation of land and buildings under DRC and UV methods, we made progress compared to the prior meeting. We even had a meeting just earlier today with the accounting team to unpick the open items and agree on a way forward. The main items that we're working on is a few valuation queries on a sample of assets, and the issues were identified with regards to, well, actually the council identified differences with regards to floor areas and an assessment of the assets not revalued at the reporting date. Moving on to the following page, as James already mentioned, we have agreed and finalized the work with regards to infrastructure assets. So that is a positive development since the January update. With regards to the pension liability valuation, apart from the update we provided last time, James mentioned the national issue, which I can explain briefly. Since the last meeting, the triennial valuation report for the pensions assets and liability has been issued. That is considered as subsequent information that should be taken into account by management and by us as auditors to determine if there might be a material impact on the reported values as of end of March 2022, because the triennial report relates to that date. We have made progress with James. We received the IAS 19 report as of the reporting date, March 2022, which takes into account the triennial data. Management considers that the difference in the valuation of assets and liabilities related to the pension fund is not material compared to the values recorded in the accounts. We, however, are still assessing our own view, a position, and EY is working on a consistent approach to be applied across local authorities. And this is currently with EY to get back to management. Moving on to the next item, valuation of council dwellings. Last time we reported that this was under internal review. So internal reviews have progressed, and we had to raise a couple of follow-up questions that the council is currently working on, and we discussed them earlier today as well. Consideration of group boundary, we had concluded on this previously, so moving on to the last page with our progress. The new central government COVID-19 grants testing has been completed. The finding we reported in this report is consistent with the previous report, and it has been corrected by management. And with regards to disclosures ongoing concern, these will have to be reassessed as we finish the audit. So it will stay as an open item in progress until we complete the audit. And we're going to just look briefly at the value for money on page 9 on the last page. We made progress with regards to value for money as well. We received responses from James and the team and Andy, and we're currently reviewing those responses. And just to highlight that VFM is an area that we have to revisit until we report on the audit. So this is also an area that will be ongoing in progress until we complete the audit. We have not identified any risks of significant weaknesses in arrangements that we need to report to you. And now we're going to open for comments or questions.
Thank you very much indeed. Colleagues, any particular questions that you have? Councillor Dennis.
It feels a bit like Groundhog Day, doesn't it? But not in a bad way, as we all know, really, we're waiting for external decisions to be made in order for us to get over the line and finally shut the door and all this sort of stuff. I suppose it's just to sort of clarify, really, from your perspective, are we in a place where when that external information is provided to us, that you think we'll be able to move rapidly towards getting this thing signed off, and then so we can move on to where we should be?
Thank you, and it's a question that we thought would be asked, and it's a very fair question. So we, at this particular point, I don't think we're necessarily waiting for external information. So the new issue that arose to do with the triennial valuation of the pension fund, we've had the report back. So the council was very quick off the mark in terms of requesting the report, and the actuary was prompt in responding. So that is with us to review. We're waiting, as Larissa said, we are looking for a consistent approach, and we have been promised an approach sort of for the last 2 to 3 weeks internally. So when we get that, we can move that forward. The bits this is a little bit more uncertain, if I'm honest, is just how quickly we will be able to resolve those outstanding queries around the valuation of property, plant and equipment. So that's been a bit of some of that has been moving forward, and some of it is a bit of a sticking point. So we're hoping that today's meeting will have unblocked that. The risk that we have bumped into really now is that we have our sort of busy season in other sectors, so NHS and National Audit Office audits in particular. So we're trying to balance getting this audit signed off against our responsibilities elsewhere. So it's not other councils calling on our time at the moment, it's more that. We want to close it down as quickly as possible. I'd love to say a date, but so far my crystal ball has been failing me quite dramatically. So each time I think there's a date, there isn't. But I think we will do very well if we can get it completed before the meeting. Our aim is that it will absolutely be completed before the next meeting. Sorry, it's because I thought we had a meeting in June, and it's not, it's August. So I think we're probably looking end of June-ish to do that. But alongside that, we are also trying to get sort of the arrangements in place for how we will run the audit for 22-23, and how we can maybe try and avoid some of the issues that have arisen this year.
And if I can just follow on from that, because that was one of my slight concerns, is normally we would just be sort of commencing the next year's audit at this sort of point. Asking you to view the crystal ball again, what do you see as the consequences for our authority in respect of the next audit?
Again, not an unexpected question. The answer, I think, is probably one that the committee may not want to hear. The audit for Hillingdon is run out of the Reading office. I'm based in Southampton, and each office is very slightly different in terms of where it is with the number of audits outstanding to complete. Reading is in a position of having a larger number of 2021 and 21-22 audits to complete before starting on 22-23. So a letter was sent to all of the authorities impacted from that particular resourcing position. And if in the I can't talk this evening, sorry. In the large majority of cases, we're probably not looking at starting until the new calendar year, which is significantly later than we started before. The intention of doing that is, I think if we try and start audits early, they won't be fully resourced with teams, and there will be multiple calls on those teams to work on other audits. By putting in place effectively a fire break and saying we absolutely just have to close down old audits and then have a proper plan in place with properly resourced teams with the right skills in place to deliver 22-23 is, we think, our best solution at this stage. It is by no means ideal, I fully appreciate that.
I can certainly see the logic of it from your perspective. I'll sort of turn the eye of Sauron round in this direction just a little bit. And, what are the implications for us of that, reasonable position at face value?
Yeah, if I may just briefly comment on that. I mean, it's not a position we want to be in or desire to be in. I think what it then comes down to is it's very important that we're working, in partnership with our external audit colleagues, because the biggest implication of that is you can't take some of the lessons learned from the previous year audit into your new year audit. That's potentially the position we face. We're now closing down the financial year for 22-23 without 21-22 being closed, and we face that being pushed out further for the following year. So what we're trying to do is make sure that we're on top of the issues emerging from the audit and bringing those into the processes that we're now embarking on for closing down 22-23. Alongside that, I think across, for example, the London local authorities and certainly the senior finance people, pressure's being put on the relevant bodies to try and resolve this. Obviously, the reforms are in place, but they'll only go at a certain speed. So, the relevant sort of pressure groups are trying to raise the profile of this, because I think some of the issues that arise, some of the more generic local issues, don't get resolved as quickly as they could do. If there was more decisive actions taken, and perhaps central government bodies potentially getting involved in some of those areas, just to say, actually, this is not something that's that significant for local authorities' financial position, so this is the way you do it, and just get on with it. But yeah, it's not a good position for anyone.
And perhaps a kind of daft question from me, but I'll ask it anyway. Are there implications for the kind of budget setting process if we haven't got a clear picture of where we've got to at year end and signed off accounts?
I think that becomes an issue that is dependent on the nature of what's emerging from the audit. The kind of issues we're encountering at the moment doesn't necessarily impact on our income and expenditure account as much. They're more technical issues centred around that concept of a true and fair view, the accuracy of how we report our asset valuations, which are not fundamental issues for the financial position of the council as such. I'm not saying they're not important, but they're not going to impact, for example, on our budget decisions, on our medium-term financial forecast directly.
Thank you, Andy. Sorry, I've hogged the mic. I'll go Councillor Higgins first, please.
Forgive me, it's my first one here, so maybe I've got this out of it. You said that the reason that you're struggling to finish it is because of assets and plant equipment valuation. Don't we just have a formula for depreciation? I don't understand why this is such a problem. Sorry.
I'll start, but I might ask Larissa to add in. So property, land and building valuation is a mix of different elements. So depreciation is a part of it for certain assets, and particularly where you're depreciating, you have assets held at depreciated replacement cost. However, you also have some assets that are under that methodology, but use something called the modern equivalent asset approach. So, for example, if you have a school in the borough, you're valuing that school not as it would be built, not replacing the school like for like, but as it would be replaced these days. So you wouldn't replace a Victorian era school, for example, in a Victorian style. You would get a new modern building. So it's obtaining the information that supports that valuation. That's an example. Some of the other types of assets that sit within land and buildings are valued at market value, and that's where there can be differences in judgment between the valuer that the council uses as their specialist and our specialists. So there's a difference in opinion in the methodology. So that work is, I think, largely completed from the point of view of the review that's been done by our specialists of the work. But until we complete all of our work, we can't do that stand back to do that. So there's different assets in there. It's not just depreciation. Is that fair, Larissa?
So just to add for context, I have experience in corporate audit where auditing properties tends to be very simple. Like you say, depreciation tends to be quite straightforward. In local government, it's more complicated because you are required to value them on a rolling basis or every year, depending on the type of property. And that's where the complication comes in, because they're valued at current value rather than historical cost.
Thank you for that. I mean, I'll go to obviously to our team then. I mean, is it law that we have to do it this particular way, or can we come to some conclusion that your figure is £10, theirs is 20, we say 15 for argument's sake, and then we can just order? Is that possible, or is it more complicated that you have to argue between yourselves to get down to the closest penny? Is it?
There are set rules on how we have to account for it and how we have to apply that, but there is an element. I mean, as Helen said, they have their valuers, we have our valuers, and there will be an element of actually, are we materially happy that the number is close enough between us? So I think we're in most of the circumstances we are happy now that the difference isn't material enough. It will be noted in the results report to say that we believe that the council has got a different value to us by 6 million, for example, but it won't stop us finishing the audit. But it is a case of just making sure both sides are happy with that sort of that gap, I guess.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think there's a lot more. I think Larissa sort of touched on this. There's a lot more subjectivity over how you value some of the assets we've got. The valuation of a school or a depot is perhaps a lot more complex than valuing an office block, for example. So that comes into play as well. And it's not a problem that's just one that we're encountering here. I speak to colleagues who also have the same debates around PPE and the valuation of their assets. So again, it's not Hillingdon specific. It doesn't, presentational as much as anything.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Matters.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose I'm thinking about the next one as opposed to the one we're just about to finish. There is a sector-wide strain, and I know that's significant and impacted everybody, as well as some decisions that need to be made by different bodies. But you spoke about the Reading office, particularly with its capacity, and I just wondered, from your experience and maybe the experience of officers, are other audit companies taking a similar approach of the kind of fire break, or is it that internally you're able to move around different offices? I know continuity is massive, so you don't want to start a whole new audit process with a whole new team in a different office. I'm not suggesting that. But I just wondered if you're getting a sense check, or if officers are getting a sense check that it's a similar approach across different companies. Because, just if that creates any other learning or any other opportunities.
So I think I should probably start by saying, it's probably unfair to just say it's Reading. It's all of us, each of our offices, we're all under pressure in different ways. It just has fallen slightly differently in different places. I can't say that other firms are taking that same approach of taking the fire break, but I think all firms are in the same position, and therefore all firms are looking at their options for how to resolve effectively the sort of what feels like a crisis in public sector audit staffing. One of the downsides of the behaviours in the way in which things are now between audit firms is that we tend to poach from each other, which is unhelpful because that's not really resolving the position on a national basis. You know, it's understandable behaviours, if I'm honest, but it isn't helpful. I think we are in a position where all audit firms are looking at what they can do to be able to resolve the old audits, because the new local government contract led by public sector audit appointments, or PSAA, takes effect from took effect from 1 April 2023. So we're all looking at how can we close down the audits that were running under the old contract, which is effectively up to the 22-23 audit, to be able to move more seamlessly into the new ones. And we're all in that same place where we're struggling at the moment. So I don't know for sure, but I think everybody is looking at different options. I just hope that we can try and avoid the options of everybody poaching from each other. And whilst I never thought I would particularly say it, a body like the Audit Commission was quite a helpful body in that sense, in terms of banging everybody's heads together almost to sort of say, you need to work together, as opposed, I'm not saying that we're not working together, but there isn't that incentive or imperative, and I think Andy referenced that in terms of some of the national decisions as well, how accounts should be presented.
And I suppose just one sort of slight ray of hope there, I think Andy also alluded to it as well. There's a little bit more publicity now about the scale of the crisis in this area now. A few more people are talking, and a few more news stories around it. So maybe a slow recognition of the scale of the challenge. Okay, any other questions or observations, colleagues? Okay, so that's the council side considered. Thank you very much indeed. Over to the pensions fund then. Still the same agenda items.
We'll take a similar approach to the pension fund, but in this instance, obviously, you have the audit results report. So this is bringing to the committee's attention our findings from the audit. Our focus is largely going to be, and I'm hoping the page numbers show on here, pages 6, 7 and possibly 8. And again, Larissa will just talk you through, starting with page 7, the work that we've done in relation to the risks that we reported. We'll set out the findings from the audit, and then again we'll take any questions that members may have.
I'm actually going to start with a summary on page 5, which lists the areas that we still need to conclude on to be able to sign off, obviously, when the council's accounts are ready as well. So we have the same issue with the triennial valuation impact that we discussed on the council side. However, this is only a disclosure in the pension fund's accounts to comply with IAS 26. We then have to update our going concern procedures, subsequent events, and a management rep letter. And then just to summarize and to refresh everyone's memory from our audit plan that was presented in July of last year, on page 7, we listed the risks and the results. We have completed all the procedures that we planned to with regards to those risks. So, as usual, the first one is with regards to risk of management override, and we address that through testing of journal entries. We have completed that with no findings to bring to your attention. The significant risk is around valuation of complex hard-to-value investments, or level 3 investments, as we call them. We completed the work in this area. We identified, or we recommended a reclassification from level 2 to level 3, which also meant that we have to carry out additional work for those assets that were reclassified. With regard to going concern, as I mentioned, we will be updating our procedures until we report. And with IAS 26, I just mentioned on the previous page. just to summarize and to explain what the audit differences were on page 6, I will start with the unadjusted audit differences. The first one is with regards to a benefit expenditure, which we consider to be overstated by 1.8 million in 21-22. But this is only because management recorded a catch-up adjustment that was due to the change in the payment period when the pension fund transitioned to the new administrator in November of 2022. So by creating this prior period historical error, which doesn't relate to 2021 but an older time, this created an overstatement in the current year, and it wasn't really material overall to the pension fund accounts, which is why management did not correct it. The second, it's adjustment, uncorrected adjustment. It's a judgmental one. It relates to the Goodwin case, and again, this is only a disclosure related to IS 26, and it was considered to be immaterial overall to the account, so it remains unadjusted in the amount of 2.9 million. And then, as I briefly mentioned, the adjusted audit difference is with regards to reclassification of investments from level 2 to level 3. So, for background from an accounting perspective to explain what this means, the CIFA code establishes a fair value hierarchy that categorizes assets based on the inputs used in the valuation techniques to measure the fair value of those assets. And there are 3 categories, starting from level 1, which are the easiest to value, with observable inputs such as listed investments, level 2 using less easy to observe inputs, and level 3 are exclusively unobservable inputs into the evaluation technique to arrive at the fair value. So management reclassified certain investments from level 3 to level 2 in the financial statements following the COVID-19 pandemic, because certain valuation alternatives were removed in 2021 and 21-22. However, because we're not able to observe the inputs into the valuation of certain investments, we suggested the reclassification to level 3. And management accepted the judgment and amended the accounts. With regards to our internal control recommendations, one is related to this reclassification, and we list them in section 6 of this report, and I will just summarize it briefly. So recommended to ensure that inputs are monitored and classified as observable or unobservable accordingly. And we had a second control recommendation around the calculation of membership numbers. There has been a restatement of membership numbers following the transfer to the new administrator, and management put a lot of effort to synchronize with the new administrator and calculate the correct membership numbers. So we recommended certain improvements in controls in that area. And this brings me to this end of my summary and opening for questions.
Thank you very much, Larissa. Any questions or points for clarification there? Okay. Thank you very much. I do remember a little bit about level 3 assets and things like that from some awareness sessions that we had. Obviously, we've heard from EY on this. Are we happy with the decision that we've got to after these discussions and sort of agreements that have been reached?
Yeah, it is collaborative, and some of these things are a case of sort of compromising, etc., etc. So we are happy with those adjustments, and yeah, we've agreed to make those adjustments going forward.
Lovely. And in terms of the recommendations around sort of improved control over aspects of this, again, happy to take that forward.
Yeah, I mean, we've got the new administrator in place now. A lot of it was because we did change the administrators and they were using different, allocating different things, etc., etc. So the new administrator is much better at keeping records, and also we're going from that we're staying with the same administrator. So for a year on year, there shouldn't be any issues in terms of that, and the way they account for the member records is much more accurate. So that's an improvement that's already in place effectively. And again, the level 2, level 3, there is always some discussion and debate, and Larissa and I sit in dark rooms banging our heads quite a long.
I'm glad I'm not privy to those conversations. My eyes.
But just trying to work out the best way forward on some of those, because it is quite subjective as well. So but happy to discuss it on each year.
Okay, lovely. And expect to issue an unmodified audit opinion. That's the headline, isn't it? Which I think is good news all round. When are we hoping for that?
So we have a draft of the audit opinion included in the report, yes, as an addendum, and we will finalise this audit once the pensions triennial valuation is cleared, and the council's accounts are signed off because they go in the same set of accounts.
I thought you were going to say that. I just couldn't remember that answer. All right, thank you very much. Any other questions or observations? Well, thank you very much for the reports. Thank you all very much for the hard work and diligence that you put into this for us. And fingers crossed we'll get to the end of the road, hopefully in the sort of timescale that we're thinking, but certainly, ideally, by the next meeting, all being well. Thank you very much indeed. We'll move forward then. So agenda item 6, we have the Internal Audit Progress Report, Q4 22-23. Claire.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chair. So yes, the Internal Audit Progress Report. During quarter 4, we have finalised 14 assurance reviews. Of those, 6 were awarded substantial assurance, 6 received reasonable assurance, 1 limited report and 1 no assurance report. We also did 2 consultancy reviews into domiciliary care provider and the Mayor's charity account. And as at the date of this report, we had 5 reports also out in draft, of which 1 of them has now been finalised. This means that at the date of this report, we had 91% of the plan that was at least out in draft, which is absolutely amazing given the challenges facing the team over the year. And credit to the team. I'm new, I'd love to take credit, but no, credit to the team for that. You'll see the details of those reviews on page 5, page 13 of the pack. Within there you'll see the limited and the no assurance report. So the limited assurance report relates to purchase cards, and we're actually undertaking some additional consultancy reviews and data analytics around this on behalf of the CMT, because this is something that, purchase cards used across the council. It isn't just a sort of finance issue. And also we've got in there the service tenancy and payroll rent payments, which is a no assurance report. This review related to a small number of very legally complex legacy accommodation agreements that we had in place. This report's taken some time to get finalised, and that's just reflective of how seriously the different teams are taking this. They do have a very detailed action plan to take this forward. And it mainly relates to around sort of evidence of those. It's not a significant concern, just to reassure you of that. Due to the complexity of this, if you have any detailed questions, I would recommend that we bring a separate paper to maybe part 2 of the next meeting to really go into the detail behind that, because it is very legally complex and I don't want to say anything incorrect at this stage. Other things to make you aware of within the progress report, we did have our EQA, so our quality inspection. It had been delayed, but actually we have now received the draft report yesterday. We've gone back with comments on that, and we will share it once it's received as final. I'm happy to share that outside of the committee rather than waiting until next August. A lot of the things that have come out of that is not unexpected, so they're things that we've already addressed, so a lot of those actions are already complete. We also have recruitment ongoing for the internal audit team. We actually have 3 new people appointed, and we're currently recruiting for a 4th position, which is quite fast in 2 months. So we're absolutely looking at resourcing that team and taking it really seriously. And then finally, we have the follow-up process for recommendations. We have issued requests for updates, and we're looking at verifying those, and we will make sure that we bring an update to those recommendations within our annual report to the next meeting. That was all I was going to say on the progress report, unless there's any questions.
Thank you very much, Claire. Colleagues, any questions for Claire for the audit service about the update that we have here? Councillor Higgins.
Sorry, I've got the report on page 29 of my pack. I don't know what. We're still short on senior internal auditor. Is that correct? Is that what you're saying on the graph?
So yeah, we haven't appointed to the senior internal auditor. We've appointed 2 internal auditors instead.
Yeah. So is there no room for the existing person that's helping to be?
So it's more that we've restructured the service. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Just in response to a couple of the points that you raised in the briefing. Historically, we've had short summaries of low or no assurance reports, and I'd quite like to see those in future updates. I appreciate the circumstances in respect of one of the audits is a little bit more difficult than usual, and I'd like to take up the offer of having a sort of briefing on that in part 2 of the next committee, if we may. I'd also like to take up the offer of once we get to a finalised external quality assessment report, of that being circulated to the committee outside of the standard agenda, or if we don't get it until much nearer August, the August meeting is fine, whatever works best for you in that respect. Congratulations, I think, is the other thing I'd say in terms of the hard work in getting all of those reports over the line. I wasn't expecting all of those, so really well done, and I can only imagine how hard you've all worked to hit and exceed the target that was set. So congratulations on that. And clearly, you know, from the kind of results of those audits, the fact that we have some limited assurance, a no assurance as well. You know, we're not cutting corners or you know, giving people an easy ride just to get things over the line. So very well done to you, to the team on this. And a second congratulations, it's like buses, I suppose, it doesn't come along very often, but when it does, there's 2 of them. Congratulations on the recruitment situation as well. Again, I wasn't necessarily expecting that you would have these kind of results this quickly, and considering how difficult the market is out there, not just for external audit professionals, but for internal audit professionals as well, or people wanting to become internal audit professionals. No mean effort there, so congratulations to you and to the team once more. Thank you, and I like the slightly briefer report overall. If there's no other questions, we'll move on. Thank you very much. So it's straight back to you, and it's agenda item 7, the internal audit plan 23 to 24, and the reviewed and updated audit charter. Claire.
Thank you. So yes, this is our internal audit plan. It's developed to reflect the key risks to the council, and also your strategic objectives and what you're looking to achieve, and how we can use the resources that internal audit have the most effectively to support you to develop those and to mitigate against those risks. We have developed an annual plan. This is to support us to make sure that we are using those resources and looking for, further ahead, because there is quite a lot of transformation going on. We're making sure that we're planning in some of those projects into future quarters. However, I do want to make sure, make it very clear that this is not a fixed plan. This is intended to be flexible. New risks will emerge, new projects will start, things will slip. So when you're looking at things in quarter 3, quarter 4, do expect there to be changes. But with any of those changes, they will be reported through our progress report, so you'll be able to see the changes and the reasons for those changes. So, you know, we're not just taking audits out because people say they don't want them. This plan has been presented to the senior management team. It's gone through the individual directorate management team meetings and has also been presented to the corporate management team to make sure that we're taking into consideration anything that they're aware of, any changes in their services. Like I say, the internal audit plan is aligned to the strategic objectives. We're looking to improve this for the 24-25 plan, but hopefully this just gives you some assurance that we are tailoring our work to make sure that we are supporting you with achieving those. At the back is the internal audit charter. This is a requirement under the internal audit standards and the public sector internal audit standards. It's required to define the roles and responsibilities of the internal audit service. It was previously presented as part of the internal audit strategy last year, which is a 5-year strategy, but this is something we've updated since I've been appointed. No significant changes in the context of it. It's just slightly more condensed and updated into my style. But actually, the majority of the content is very, very similar and the same. And it's also had a bit of an update in terms of the formatting to meet the Hillingdon branding. But yeah, no big changes in there.
Thank you very much indeed. Colleagues, we've got an important piece of paper here. It's the plan for your coverage over the next 12 months, subject to odd changes, no doubt. Any comments or questions or observations about that or the updated charter? Councillor Dennis.
Just a question really about how you prioritise, because obviously with less resources, prioritisation becomes more important, but obviously an organisation so complex and big and varied as the council, prioritisation is always important. In a sense, you probably give value to auditing everything. I think I don't know if everyone else would feel that way, but I'm sure you'd feel that way. So just a bit more explanation, I think, about how you prioritise would be useful.
Yeah, so we start off with what are the key risk areas. So we look through your corporate risk register, the directorate risk registers. We meet with each of the directorates in terms of saying what new emerging risks is coming out, because they may not have made it onto the risk register yet, making sure reflecting those. We then look at what other sources of assurance there are. So if it's areas that external audit are looking at or counter fraud are looking at, we make sure that we don't duplicate their work. Or things, like budget monitoring, if there's a lot of budget monitoring reports and potentially it's not an area we'd look at. And then finally, we just work through meeting with each of the directorates and saying what is their priorities and how can we support them to provide the best value for money. We do have an outsourced provider, so we do work with Mazars who can provide us with additional support if we do have, more areas coming out and more risks coming out that we need to audit. So there is that option there.
Please.
It's a slightly cheeky question, but how can you be confident that people are telling you what needs to be audited?
That is a good question. So we do look at things like, KPIs or monitoring reports that are available for each of the services. As those are developing further and we're setting more objectives for each service for this year, then that's something that we can look at in terms of identifying hotspots. Because we look at the risk registers, and they should be things that are used proactively by each of the services and the directorates to monitor what their risks are, that should give us a reflection. But we do look at external things coming out, so things coming out of the private sector, looking at other local authorities, things coming out, the news and things that we need to be aware of. So we don't just rely on the directors, and we do question them.
Thank you very much, Councillor Matthew.
Hello. Sorry, I'm a little new to first time subbing. So the council's obviously got a lot of data projects and teams are using new technologies, and also I know that the counter fraud are doing that, etc. How much do you see that changing the way you work over the next 12 months? Efficiencies aside, but just generally, how will that change the kind of direction of travel for you?
So a lot. In terms of within individual audits, if we're looking at any areas, because there's a lot more data available, and we could use that to identify anomalies, so focusing on more data analytics and really pinpointing potential issues using that data that's available, so a lot less manual processes, a lot less sample testing of manual processes. It's better having that data out there. but also it's a lot more auditing of the accuracy of that data. So if we're relying on these systems, we're looking at more data accuracy reviews, sort of data quality reviews. So we've got things in there around performance information. So if people are moving towards more systems and actually saying, okay, so you're relying on this system data coming out, your KPIs, you're saying that you're hitting every single one of these timescales. How accurate is that data? Can we look at the information behind that and get the supporting evidence to provide assurance that that data is accurate, because that's what we're relying on. And also in terms of audits, a lot of our reviews, you mentioned IT, although we don't have, audits particularly named IT, we do have an IT applications audit. A lot of our reviews do have IT elements in there. So Oracle, obviously new system being introduced, that will have, as part of the scope of that, we'll be looking at, how do we make sure the system or the data that's in there is accurate, and how is that being monitored, or how do we get assurance that that's being done as part of the project. And also things like telecare, how do we keep the data secure, how do we store that, share that, all of that will be included, and how is that data accessible as well.
Thank you very much. Councillor Higgins.
Sorry, again, you have to forgive me for my naivety and thing. I mean, I've got a graph here, I suppose, I think it was for the previous thing, which is page 27. It says about the high risks and medium risks and low risks. I'm trying to do this without paper, so forgive me. It's I think it's page 27. I understand that we have high risks and stuff, but when we're planning, are we planning? How do we plan to get those high risks down? I mean, some of them you won't be able to, I appreciate that. But there is some here that we, you mentioned Oracle, which is not that new, I don't think, but it's new for us. But I just want to know how we're managing that sort of area, that you've got a high risk, how is our objective, and how are you planning that out so that maybe that risk will only be 6 months rather than a year?
So that's probably more of a risk management side of things. So we have all our risk registers that are managed by the different services, by the different directorates. Those risks on there, they will have action plans around. They should be monitoring those, and they should be looking at reducing those risks over time. So if something is on there as being a high risk, then they should be looking at it more regularly. In terms of the risk ratings and the medium and high within the plan, that's our internal sort of rating if we're looking at areas to review. That doesn't mean that we have on our risk register like organisational culture as a high risk. So we don't have, I don't know if we have that on our risk register. It may be on the HR one. I don't look at all of them in that much detail. So yeah, it's not like a risk register in terms of having set actions around that. We think it's high risk. We'll do an internal audit of it. We will agree with the service what risks we're going to look at as part of that. If everything comes out fine and they have controls in place to mitigate all of those risks in that area and a substantial assurance report, then we probably wouldn't look at it again for a few years because we've got assurance over that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Burlers.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Just a question about follow-up ones. All these are all new ones. I mean, some have been carried over from last year. But where do the follow-ups fit in? And you've got the staff resources to do the follow-ups as well as do these new risks.
Yeah, so the follow-up process is separate. So if we do a review and any high or medium recommendations that we raise through that, we follow them up as they become due. As a standing throughout the year, we do that as they become due. It isn't like a one-off audit. If it was substantial assurance, we probably wouldn't look at it again the following year. If it's a no assurance report, again, we would follow it up through our follow-up process. If we don't think they're taking enough action, then perhaps we could put in another formal audit and redo it. But once it's done, we'd be more looking at following up those recommendations through the ongoing follow-up process to make sure that they're embedded. And as part of that, when I say we follow them up, it's verifying that they are actually embedded. So we don't just say, this is a high recommendation, it's supposed to be done by the end of June, 1st of July, we email them and say, has this been done? We actually go and verify that it has been and it is embedded. making sure that it is implemented, whatever that recommendation is. And if it isn't, we'd set a new implementation date and follow it up when that is due.
Thank you very much. Okay. Councillor Chandler.
Thank you, Chair. Just with the follow-up to Claire then, so when you will be providing us reports at each meeting, will you be providing follow-up reports as well to say what have they been closed off or have they been carried forward?
Yes, that is hopefully the plan. So we're going to do it as part of the annual report. So because the follow-up has been stepped down over COVID and due to the challenges of the team, we've reintroduced it. So we've got a backlog to go through and clear. So I'm going to do it as part of the annual report for the next meeting, and then ongoing after that will be a sort of regular process with the number that we followed up and a kind of summary.
And it will certainly be good to have visibility of that, and we understand the reasons why that hasn't been regularly provided recently. Thank you. From my perspective, I think it's a very comprehensive plan. I think it covers, a number of key existing and topical areas. So I like the content. I notice, Andy, not much in the way of finance, but can't have everything, I suppose. No, joking aside. I was really pleased to see some particular audits on here. Climate action, I think, is an interesting one, and it'd be very, very important, obviously, to begin to make progress in this area. So looking forward to that one, obviously. Contract management is always interesting. The workforce planning one, just at the risk of diving down a rabbit hole. I've read some interesting reports recently about challenges many authorities face around the ageing demographic of the workforce. Not a problem we suffer from, particularly here in Hillingdon, looking at this fair representation of the workforce, no doubt. But is that something you might consider in that piece of work in part?
Yeah, absolutely. So looking at how we've identified what our current workforce is, and how are we forecasting it. So yeah, aging workforce or changes in services, how are we making sure that we're getting the staff in advance rather than waiting.
Yeah, interesting area. Culture as well, I'm pleased to see on there, and we'll look forward with great interest to that. A couple of other questions, if I may, very briefly. The number of days allocated to grant claims has gone up a fair amount. Is that simply because there's more grant claims to work through?
Yes, there has been an increase in those, and it just reflects the time that we've taken over the last year for them. Thank you very much. A sort of decrease in the time allocated to ad hoc consultancy. Given the amount of transformation and change going on, is that sensible? So I think where we've included reviews in the plan, in the detailed plan, some of those can actually be consultancy reviews. So we change the scope we change whether it's an assurance or a consultancy review based on when we scope it. So although the number of days for ad hoc consultancy is reduced, there is still consultancy reviews going on there. So things like the Oracle programme, if necessary, that would be more of a consultancy piece if they need more support rather than an assurance piece giving assurance that they are managing it themselves. So the ad hoc consultancy is more of, one-off requests for some data analytics throughout the year rather than a detailed review.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Thank you too for the KPIs. Good to see that you've drawn these up. A lot are around timeliness. Do you see that as one of the main challenges that you're facing, either within the team, but also in terms of management doing what you need them to do for you?
Yeah, I think over the last year, because we've had, external resource coming in to do reviews, it's one of the things that they flagged up. It's really just let's get the basics right. Let's get, if management can get us information before we start the audit, then it means that we have a sort of more structured plan. And so, yeah, it's kind of one of the basics to get right to begin with, and then we'll look at extending the KPIs once they're all perfect and green.
And if management aren't getting the stuff to you that you need, should we bring them in to scold them? Because we shouldn't be criticising you, should we?
Well, that's why we've put some of the recommendations in there, the KPIs in there, because I don't want me to be holding my team to account for getting reviews done quickly if actually it's management that aren't providing the information. So yes, we have included KPIs for management in there, and more than happy to report anyone that isn't responding. But I'm hoping we have better engagement, and they will do.
I'm sure you will. Are the management aware of these KPIs?
Yes, they've seen all of these through CMT, so yes.
Fabulous. Okay, that's it from me, other than to say I'm happy with the charter as well. I'm happy with the plan. I think from the committee's perspective, we're happy to approve both as requested. So thank you very much indeed again. Okay, we're on to agenda item 8, the Counter Fraud Progress Report for Q4. Alex.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to take the committee through the Q4 2022-23 Progress Report, which starts on page 41 of your packs. The team's achieved another £1.6 million of savings this quarter, bringing the year-to-date total to £12.3 million against the target of £3.5 million. Our main focus again this quarter has been in housing, and we've recovered another 22 properties due to tenancy fraud, bringing the year-to-date total to 84, which is the most we've ever recovered in 1 year. The risk still remains in this area, and we have 119 live investigations relating to tenancy fraud. We've also been very proactive in terms of our projects. We've continued our B&B residency check project, which has been going on for 4 to 5 months now. And we've highlighted another 14 cases where we've closed the emergency accommodation down due to non-occupation, which that brings to 24 for the year. We're actually going to make a slight change to this going forward due to the risk. It's actually going to become business as usual now for counter fraud, and there'll be a regular visiting programme throughout the new financial year. We've continued our revenues maximisation work, trying to identify businesses that we are unaware about that need to pay rates. We've issued billings again for another £120,000, and we're just currently waiting for Cabinet member approval to take up the second year option with our suppliers working in this area. We've also continued internally with our own work, and we've identified another 9 cases that are currently under investigation, which is across council tax and NNDR. Social care, we've taken on another 6 cases. That's doubled our caseload to 11 in social care. Now, obviously, this seems quite a low caseload compared to the 119 we're talking about in housing. However, the social care cases are far more complicated and are extremely high value, and they take quite a while for them to come to fruition. Our on-site immigration officer has actually changed. The Home Office have made some slight amendments to the on-site immigration officers at local authorities, and we have a new one who's currently in post. However, I'm pleased to say that another £106,000 of savings have been identified for applicants that have tried to access services that don't have the right immigration status. The Cabinet Office and the NFI have just released its biannual matches for fraud, loss and error. And we've started to work with service areas by passing some of those matches on to them and supporting them. Some of the more complicated matches that have an investigative sort of spin on them are being kept within counter fraud, and we are actively working on them, and hopefully I'll have some updates at coming meetings for you all. The forward look is mainly focused around obviously the plan that I'm about to present to you, ensure that we complete that plan. The new target, and we're also trying to improve our comms package, where to engage with the residents in terms of what we're achieving. More than just, at the moment, it's more about we're engaging around what the risks are and how to report. It's more about actually the achievements that we've achieved in different areas. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Alex. Councillor Higgins, please.
I remember a long time ago you coming to, I think it was corporate services, and it's actually gone on. It's a fantastic success story, really. I just want to go about, I think it's on page 48, around beds and sheds. You've got 9 unlisted properties, beds and sheds. I mean, how does this actually come to you? Is it, and also the other, that is the question overall, really, is that I'm really interested in how the success is at how you've got, is it residents telling you, or is it investigations? That'd be really interesting to find out.
Yeah, so it's kind of a mixed bag, if I'm honest. So we've done, again, there's been some comms over the last 12 months where we've obviously gone out to residents to warn them about beds and sheds and notifying us.
That obviously spurred some referrals that came through. Internal data, there's obviously lots of internal data from planning, building control. There's all sorts that feeds into us that helps us identify sort of different issues. And also what we find is we have the teams out and about. The team that deals with revenues is consistently out in the borough, on the road, and they're noticing things themselves. So that's another reason. So yeah, it's quite a mixed bag how we're finding these things.
Thank you very much, Jim.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments about the update? I'll say a couple of things then, if I may. My first couple of comments on Paras 2.1 and 2.2. I must have felt a little bit gushing when I wrote this, but I put awesome and three ticks. So I mean that's about as good as it gets from me. 3 ticks, not just one. 3 and capital letters. It's a terrific year. We all know that it's been a very consistent high level of performance throughout the year. I know you and the team will have worked very, very hard indeed to have achieved the results and successes that you have achieved. Awesome, I think it's a very fair description of that, so well done to you all. Fantastic year. And I know that I don't want to dive ahead into the future look, but I absolutely know that you put the target figure for next year as far back in the papers as possible, because you knew that I'd be writing where's the target for next year well before it actually appeared in the paper pack. I wrote it on the bottom of page 52 just so that you know figures for next year. But it's not just about the figures. You've done well in terms of performance against the KPIs that don't just cover money. It covers about how you perform the service and the timeliness of that. It's a great success story again. So I don't think there's much more for me to say other than really well done. Councillor Higgins, anybody to follow?
Yeah, I think what you're doing is great. I mean, is your knowledge? I mean, because it really is good to see that it's a department that's not working in a silo. You're having to draw with every single department. I think that is what the real success that I think other areas of the council can learn from. I mean, that's why I think it's really, really brilliant. So that's all I think.
Very fair observation. Councillor Chandler.
And also bear in mind you've had some resourcing issues as well, haven't you? So this is a fantastic set of figures, and they've worked really well across internal fraud and audit, which has been really, really pleasing over the last few meetings that we've seen. So well done, team.
Thank you very much. Well done. Councillor Burrs.
Yeah, I was going to mention resources issues. Have you still got them, or have they eased out lately?
So I currently still have one vacancy, so we're pretty much there, and we're just looking at options of what to do for the future.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I suppose at the risk of dragging this out, and I don't mean it that way, I was interested in finding out a little bit more, if you can tell us a little bit more about the transformation work that you're doing within the service. That struck me as, taking it to the next level potentially as well.
Yeah. So the transformation project for the next 12 months is quite ambitious. I think it's fair to say. It's got quite a lot of streams to it, and it's mainly about making us a bit even more efficient and effective moving forward. It's looking at our case management system. It's looking at data analytics. It's also reviewing our options for disposal decisions. So there are things out there that we can use alongside our civil or criminal cases to recover monies, particularly around subletting. We're also looking at how we're operating and the structure itself. I'm trying to think what else is on there. So there's quite a bit, but it's mainly around being a more efficient and effective service.
Okay. Be interesting to hear how that proceeds, obviously, during the course of the year. Thank you very much. Well done, everyone. If you can pass the message back from the committee as a whole, very impressive performance over Q4 and the rest of the year before that. Thank you. Which brings us on then to the plan for the next year. Alex, again, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the Council Board annual plan for the coming financial year starts on page 57 of your pack. The main body of the report is pretty much the same of what I delivered to the committee last year. There are a couple of changes in the main body. Obviously, to support internal audit over the last 12 months with some resourcing challenges, we actually undertook some of the consultancy work for the first time. I'm very fortunate that I have a member of staff that is qualified in counter-fraud and internal audit. And it's mainly been around fraud controls within processes. That's been very successful, and we've now added it as part of the activity that we do, whether we undertake it ourselves or actually in conjunction with internal audit with a collaborative approach. The second thing you will notice that the Chair has already pointed out is on page 64 in 7.3, right at the end of the report, is the new financial target. So the target for this year was set at £3.5 million. It's been increased by £1.5 million to £5 million. And I'm sure the committee will have some questions on that, which I will take in a bit. Moving on, in Appendix A, we have an up-to-date fraud risk assessment and what we expect the fraud landscape to look like for the next 12 months. I also reflected back at the last 12 months, and unfortunately I wasn't wrong in terms of what I presented. We were in the eye of a perfect storm in terms of fraud, and that is pretty much the same and continuing now with the cost of living crisis. In Appendix B, you will find the counter-fraud work plan. Now, this basically derives from the counter-fraud risk register, where we have our suite of risks and what we, in terms of fraud, and us talking to different directorates. It's also between myself, Claire, and Steph discussing sort of different other risks that are coming out through the corporate risk register or through internal audit. And it's mainly around the three biggest service areas of revenues, housing, and social care. And that's all from me. I'm happy to take any questions.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed for the presentation. I'll go with Councillor Dennis first of all. Councillor Higgins.
Yep. I'm going to go with the money and ask the question that possibly is on many people's mind. You've had a fantastic year and got lots of praise in the last agenda item. So I'm going to start off this one with a bit of a hardball. Why is your target 5 million when you've managed to save 12 million this year?
I thought that may be coming up, so I brought the maths with me. Basically, I had discussions with the Cabinet Member of Finance around this, and so did Andy, and then Andy and I had quite a lengthy discussion of where to set this. So, we achieved 12.3 million, but £6 million of that was the billings through the NNDR. And that is really difficult to try and build into a target, because it's very difficult to understand what we don't know. So that was the first element. The second element is a lot of that £6 million was actually backdated billings. And of course, we've now had a revaluation in business rates from the 1st of April 2023, so we have no opportunity to backdate anymore. So that was one reason. You'll also notice, if we go all the way back to the progress report, if you just bear with me 1 second, and in the progress report on page 46, you'll see table 1 is all the properties recovered and how they're recovered. And it's also noted in there that we have been undertaking work on behalf of tenancy management. So that obviously isn't going to continue. So I've taken out £1.5 million of property recovery, which was us working on behalf of tenancy management, which leaves us at 4.8 million for the year. Hence where we've sort of like forecasted where we want to try and improve based on that going forward. So we've set it at £5 million.
Thank you very much. Councillor Higgins, were you going to ask a similar question? Or?
No, not really. No, I understood that when you started it, you're going to get really good quick wins and low-hanging fruit. It's going to be more difficult as we go along. My question is around the IT procurement and goods services. It says an increase needed to win government contracts. How much did you win last time, and how much is on offer at the moment to win?
So what that's relating to is it's more about external businesses and the cost of living crisis in particular. So if you look at businesses that may be struggling and they have opportunities to tender, so we say in the the public sector, they may try and circumvent any of the processes or manipulate the processes to be awarded them those. It's more about the external factor rather than ourselves.
Thank you for the clarification. Any Councillor Matters?
Thank you. If I may be cheeky enough, in a previous committee you attended, the Finance Corporate Services, we spoke about the work that you were doing and how residents' priorities might be built into the planning of the work plan, either through elected members or so that residents really felt that their priorities, although there's always financial benefit and there's always benefit to residents through the work you do. Sometimes residents have a particular passion for a certain element that frustrates them and their quality of life. So I just wondered if you'd built that in or how that was built into this plan.
No, that's a fair question. So yes, obviously when you're looking at the risk scoring, finance has a lot to do with that. However, so does reputational risk and operational risk for the organisation. So some of the things that that residents may obviously be more interested in are things like Blue Badge. Obviously that is built into this plan. We have proactive days. We obviously accept referrals from the project and from the public, and we do go out and investigate. But there are other things that actually kind of fit across both risks. A lot of the housing work, though financial, is also really important for residents because obviously it's freeing up much needed accommodation in a time of crisis.
Thank you very much. 5 million. I mean, you know, I guess as a fraud team sitting on the back of 12.3 million recoveries, 5 million, what's the point of getting out of bed in the morning? I shouldn't say that. You know, the target, a target's a target. You've had a cracking year this year. If you get 5 million next year, I'm sure everyone will be more than delighted. You know, I have no problem with the target set as it is. You know, go out, overachieve against it. Everyone will be happy, I'm sure. As you say, there's some similarity with previous reports and previous forward looks as to be expected. I think it's a good plan, and no doubt the committee as a whole, again, will wish you well, all of you, in you know, delivering against the plan. Looks at the right things from my and our perspective, I think. So thank you. Good luck.
Thank you
all. So moving on then, we have agenda item 10, which is a little look at our own forward work programme. Please, Ryan.
Yep, so the work programme firstly notes the dates of the upcoming meetings and then also has a list of the reports that are due to come to each of those.
Thank you very much. I think the dates have been advertised for us for a little while, so I don't think there's any particular issues over those. We will move on then to AOB. I've been asked to just table this as a potential possibility, and I'd like to raise the possibility with the committee and members of paperless agendas and paperless packs as AOB. Any particular thoughts on that as presumably environmental related part of the climate work that we'll be looking at on the audit side later this year? Councillor Dennis, sorry, first.
A very small but important question. This is for Ryan. Do we have access to plugs, enough plugs for all of us in this room? Because obviously if we're using our laptops and all that sort of stuff, in theory I'm okay with it personally, but I have said yes before and I'm put in rooms with no plugs.
Yeah, it's definitely something we would need to.
We'll work out the practical.
So if that issue could be resolved, I'm okay with it.
Councillor Higgins.
Sorry, I've been championing this for about 6 months now, so we've already done it in planning. These machines are fantastic, what we've got as councillors. I know you like your paper, all accountants like paper, but it's time for change. And yes, the only issues, I mean, I've adapted with IT to make this last longer than normal, and I think that's right, and I think you're absolutely correct that the most thing is to make sure we've got the infrastructure. Also to make sure that officers have the same equipment as we do who are presenting in committees, because that would make it a lot easier as well, because and we use the screens available as well. So it really is a positive. I would say that it is impossible to go 100%. You always need a pen somewhere along the line. So, but this works as well on the machine. So I think it's brilliant. So.
Would Councillor Lewis say the same?
I don't know. You'd have to. I don't know. And
okay. Do we have any strong feelings?
Really
Councillor Chandler first. Sorry.
Well, I'm old-fashioned. I like pen and paper and I'll scribble as I'm reading along. That's just me. But if we have to go paperless, then no. Right. But this is easy to carry in the handbag.
Councillor Burles.
Well, I can't talk about handbag, but I prefer the paper myself as well. find it a lot easier to follow, and I think there's too much time spent on screens, etc., and it looks rude. Everybody looking at their screen. It's like a craftwork concert sort of thing,
That's really good. I like that.
And those that remember craftwork, those that remember craftwork, but I don't know. I prefer the paper, and you can get your teeth into it a bit more.
So you're a model, and you're looking good.
We've got a split in the voting here. Councillor Matters, do you have a view one way or another here?
I'm always pro-technology, but I suffer with dyslexia, so I have to use the blue paper. But I might try the IT thing and see if I can get a blue... We've tried before, try and get a blue overlay with the screens. Yeah. But I have no idea what Councillor Abbey would prefer. But, I mean, with pensions, where we have books, I've gone for paper, but I'm trying to find other ways.
I hope you go 50-50, because that means I probably get a casting vote then for as the chair for the first time ever in anything. And I love paper, but I'm going to go with the modern approach, I think, as proposed here.
That was a surprise.
I know. I thought I'd just mix it up. I was overcome with radicalism there, and if it's been done, it can be done. I guess people are free to print them off if they prefer to do so themselves. I am a creature of paper, and I do red pen or put things like awesome with 3 ticks where it's occasionally deserved. But I think we should maybe move with the top. I can do it on the screen. Yeah, but you've got a nice kind of proper laptop-y thing. Okay, I think we'll go. We can certainly. How about we trial it next time? We'll trial it for next time. If you want to print it off, please, by all means. Craft work. But I think as a policy, I think that's what we should aim to do. Whew. More excitement on that piece than I was expecting. Any other business from anybody else? Looking around. Then thank you all very much indeed for your attendance today and for the presentations and for the support in running the meeting. And thank you very much to anyone viewing at home or elsewhere this evening. Thank you.